Have you ever wondered if you have Viking ancestry? The Viking Age, spanning roughly from the 8th to the 11th century, was an era marked by the travels and settlements of seafaring warriors from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Contrary to common belief, these Vikings were not a single, unified race, but rather a collective of warriors hailing from different Scandinavian regions. Their journeys took them far and wide, reaching as far as Europe, Russia, Iceland, Greenland, and even North America. If you're intrigued by the possibility of having Viking blood flowing through your veins, then this video is for you. The earliest signs of Viking ancestry are found in your family history. Just as a treasure map holds the key to buried gold, your family history can reveal the Viking heritage that lies within your bloodline. It's not simply a matter of looking at your last name and saying, "Aha! I'm a Viking." Instead, it's about digging deeper into your family history and unearthing the clues that might point to a Scandinavian past. Let's talk about surnames. There are a number of common Scandinavian surnames that could be a sign of Viking ancestry. Names ending in sen or son, for example, Jensen or Larsen, are a strong indication of a Nordic ancestry. This naming tradition of adding sen or son to the father's name was common in Viking times, and it continues in Scandinavia even today. But it's not just about the sens and the sons. Other surnames like Lindberg, Dahl, and Bjorn, which are derived from Scandinavian landscapes and wildlife, could also be a hint towards your Viking roots. Now you might be thinking, I don't have a Scandinavian surname. Does that mean I'm out of the Viking club? Not necessarily. Remember, Vikings were explorers, traders, and settlers. They traveled far and wide, intermingling with different cultures and populations. This means that even if your surname doesn't scream Viking, there might still be Nordic blood running through your veins. Researching your family tree is a great way to uncover this hidden heritage. Historical records and documents, such as birth and death certificates, marriage licenses, and immigration papers, can provide invaluable information about your ancestors. Also, keep an eye out for any family legends or stories that might hint at a Viking past. Often these tales, passed down from generation to generation, hold seeds of truth that can help piece together your ancestral puzzle. So take a closer look at your family history. If you find Scandinavian surnames in your family tree, or records of ancestors hailing from Denmark, Norway, or Sweden, you might just have Viking blood. Modern science has given us another tool to trace our Viking ancestry, our DNA. This molecule, passed down from generation to generation, carries within it the secrets of our past, including our connection to the seafaring Vikings of the past. You may wonder, how can our DNA reveal such information? The answer lies in genetic markers. These are specific segments of DNA that vary among individuals and can be used to trace your lineage. For those of Viking descent, certain genetic markers, or DNA family groups, are remarkably common. Picture a DNA ancestry group as a branch on the enormous family tree of humanity. Each branch represents a group of people who share a common ancestor. Notably, the ancestry groups IM253 and RM420 are often associated with Viking ancestry, having been found in high frequencies among the Scandinavian population during the Viking Age. However, it's important to remember that not all individuals with these family groups are of Viking descent, and not all those of Viking descent will have these markers. Genetic inheritance is a complex process, and these markers are simply pieces of a much larger puzzle. So how can you uncover these markers in your own DNA? That's where genetic testing services come in. Companies like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe can analyze your DNA and pinpoint these markers, potentially revealing your Viking roots. It's as simple as sending in a small saliva sample and then waiting for your results to arrive. Remember, these tests don't provide definitive proof of Viking ancestry. They merely offer clues that, when combined with historical records and other data, can help you piece together your family past. Your DNA holds the key to your Viking roots. It's a treasure trove of information, waiting to be unlocked. Through the power of modern science, we can now peer back through the centuries and discover our connection to the Vikings, those fearless explorers and warriors of the past. Do you know that certain physical traits can be indicators of Viking ancestry? Let's dive right into it. The Vikings, hailing from the Scandinavian regions of Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, were known for their distinctive physical features. These physical traits have been passed down through generations and could be a telltale sign of your Viking lineage. Firstly, let's talk about eye color. Vikings were known to predominantly have blue or green eyes. According to genetic researchers, the gene for blue eyes, a mutation from the default of brown, originated in the Black Sea region and spread out with human migration. The Vikings, with their seafaring expeditions, might have further spread this gene. So if you have blue or green eyes, you might just have a Viking in your family tree. Next, let's discuss hair color. Vikings were often depicted as blonde or red-haired in historical accounts. The trait for blonde hair is believed to have evolved in the northern European regions, a response to the reduced sunlight of these areas. Red hair, on the other hand, is a recessive trait, meaning both parents must carry the gene for it to appear in their offspring. While it's most commonly associated with the Celtic people, it was also found among the Vikings. Lastly, the Vikings were known for their robust build. They were seafaring warriors, after all, and their physical strength was a key attribute in their conquests and explorations. While body structure can be influenced by many factors, including diet and lifestyle, a naturally sturdy build could be an indication of your Viking ancestors. Remember, these are just indicators and not definitive proof of Viking ancestry. Genetics is a complex field, and traits can skip generations or show up unexpectedly due to the magic of DNA recombination. Those physical traits you've inherited could be a sign of your Viking heritage. Where your ancestors lived can also provide clues to your Viking ancestry. As we trace the paths that the Vikings carved across the globe, we uncover a tapestry of exploration, trade, and settlement. From around the year 800 to the 11th century, these Scandinavian seafarers embarked on ventures that spanned vast distances, leaving their mark in the records of history and quite possibly in your family tree. The Vikings were not a single race, but a band of seafaring warriors hailing from Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. Their journeys began with attacks on monasteries in England in the year 793. This announced the start of widespread raids and settlements across Ireland, Scotland, and England. If your ancestry traces back to these regions, you might very well have Viking blood coursing through your veins. Their adventures did not stop at the British Isles. The Vikings extended their reach to the European continent, conducting notable raids in France and Spain. They navigated treacherous seas, braved harsh climates, and established settlements in remote locations. In the mid-9th century, the Vikings ventured further north, establishing settlements in Iceland and Greenland. These fearless explorers possibly even set foot on North American shores, specifically Newfoundland, long before Columbus sailed the ocean blue. As the Second Viking Age dawned, England once again became the focus of large-scale raids, culminating in Danish rule under King Knut. After Knut's death, England was reclaimed by Edward the Confessor, leading to the Norman conquest in 1066. So whether you hail from the misty moors of Scotland, the emerald fields of Ireland, the frosty landscapes of Iceland, or the verdant forests of Newfoundland, the place you call home may be a testament to your Viking roots. So, what does it mean to have Viking ancestry? It's a question that has intrigued many, and as we've explored in this video, there are multiple ways to understand this lineage. The Vikings voyaged far and wide, leaving their mark across various regions. If your ancestors hailed from areas the Vikings are known to have settled, such as parts of the UK, Ireland, Iceland, or certain regions in France and Russia, you might just have some Viking in you. All these signs interconnect and can be used to trace your Viking roots. But remember, they are pieces of a larger puzzle. One sign on its own might not prove Viking ancestry, but a combination of these factors could point towards a Viking heritage. Whether or not you have Viking ancestry, remember, it's the history that makes us who we are today.
Deep inside your cells, there is a ghost, a genetic echo left behind by warriors, travelers, and settlers from 1,000 years ago. For 3 centuries, the Norsemen didn't just raid. They settled, they married, and they left a code in the blood of millions of people alive today. You might have wondered if you are one of them. Sign number 1 is often called the Viking disease. Modern doctors call it Dupuytren's contracture. It is a condition where the tissue under your palm thickens, eventually pulling your ring and pinky fingers permanently inward. It is overwhelmingly found in Northern Europeans. If your grandfather's hand looks like this, he might be sharing a trait with the men who gripped the shield walls. Sign number 2 is hidden in your gut. Can you drink this? Most of the human population cannot process milk as adults, but in the frozen north, a specific mutation spread rapidly. It allowed Vikings to survive harsh winters on dairy when crops failed. If you can drink a glass of milk today without getting sick, you are likely carrying the lactase persistence mutation, but physical traits are just clues. The proof is in the code. If you have taken a DNA test, look for this specific marker, haplogroup 11. This is the father line. It is found in 35% of Norwegian men today, but it also lights up in the specific parts of England, Scotland, and Normandy, where the Vikings settled. Finally, check your name. The Vikings didn't use family names, they used patronymics. Son of John became Johnson. Son of Thor became Thorson. And look at your town. If you live in a place ending in by, like Derby or Whitby, you are living in a town literally named by a Viking settler. We are not just studying history, we are carrying it. The Vikings didn't disappear, they just became us.
Look in the mirror right now. Look at your nose. Not at how it looks. Look at its shape, the bridge, the angle, the width of the nostrils. Because scientists have now proven something that changes the way we understand facial features entirely. Your nose was not shaped by chance. It was not simply inherited from your parents in some random genetic lottery. The shape of your nose was forged by thousands of years of survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. And if you have a certain type of nose, a high narrow bridge, straight defined profile, narrow nostrils, you may be carrying the physical signature of Viking ancestry in the very center of your face. The nose is one of the most powerful windows into your ancestry that exists on the human face. Unlike eye color or hair color, which can appear randomly across many different ethnic groups, nose shape follows specific genetic patterns that are deeply tied to where your ancestors came from and the climate they survived in for thousands of years. In 2017, researchers at Pennsylvania State University published a landmark study in PLOS Genetics, one of the most respected peer-reviewed scientific journals in the world. They 3D scanned the faces of over 10,000 people and measured 7 specific nose shape traits across populations from 4 different climate regions of the world. What they found was extraordinary. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly what your nose shape is telling you about the people who came before you and whether the blood of the Norse runs through your veins. So what exactly is the Viking nose? And do you have one? The Norse, or Nordic nose, has several very specific characteristics that distinguish it from other nose shapes. Understanding each one will help you identify whether you carry this ancestral trait. The first and most defining feature is a high, narrow bridge. The nasal bridge, the bony upper portion of your nose, between your eyes, sits high. It creates a straight, defined line from the forehead to the tip of the nose, without any significant curve or bump. When you look at a Norse nose in profile, it is almost perfectly straight. The second feature is narrow nostrils. The width of the nostrils, the openings at the base of the nose, is significantly narrower than what you would see in people from warmer climate ancestry. The nostril openings are closer together and more vertically oriented, rather than wide and flared. The third feature is moderate projection. The Norse nose projects outward from the face with confidence. It is not flat against the face, nor excessively large. It has a strong presence that balances with the prominent cheekbones and jawline that typically accompany Norse facial features. And the fourth feature, the one most people overlook, is thin nasal skin. The skin over the nose is fine and close to the bone and cartilage beneath it. You can often see the subtle contours of the nasal structure through the skin, giving the nose a refined, sculpted appearance. Pause this video right now. Look in a mirror or take a photo in profile. Do you see a high, straight bridge, narrow nostrils, a nose that projects confidently from your face? Because if you do, what I am about to tell you is going to explain exactly why. Here is where it gets genuinely fascinating. For over a century, scientists debated whether nose shape differences between human populations were simply random, the result of genetic drift over thousands of years, or whether something more deliberate was happening. In 2017, that debate was settled. The Penn State study 3D scanned the noses of over 10,000 people from 4 completely different population groups and climates. They measured 7 separate nose shape characteristics, and they found something that proved natural selection, survival of the fittest, had directly shaped the human nose. Nostril width and the width of the nasal base had evolved faster across populations than could be explained by random genetic drift alone. Something was driving these changes, something deliberate, something environmental. The conclusion was clear. Narrower noses evolved in cold, dry climates. Wider noses evolved in warm, humid climates. The reason is elegant in its simplicity. The nose is your body's air conditioning system. Before air reaches your lungs, it must be warmed and humidified to protect the delicate respiratory tissue inside. A narrow nasal passage forces the air to travel more slowly and contact more of the warm, moist nasal lining before reaching the throat. In freezing Scandinavian winters, where temperatures can plummet to -20 or 30 degrees, this is not a cosmetic feature. It is a survival mechanism. Wide nostrils would allow a flood of freezing Arctic air to rush unfiltered into the respiratory tract, causing damage and increasing risk of infection. The Norse people, whose narrower noses could better condition that freezing air, survived. Their children inherited those noses. Their children's children inherited them. Generation after generation, that nose shape was selected for and strengthened, until eventually, it reached you. But here is the part nobody talks about. Because the science of where this nose shape actually came from goes back far further than the Viking Age. And the answer involves something that will completely change how you see your own face. The Vikings did not create this nose shape. They inherited it. When modern humans first migrated out of Africa into Europe and Western Asia, approximately 40 to 50,000 years ago, they encountered something, a different species already living there. Neanderthals, people who had spent hundreds of thousands of years adapting to the brutal cold of European Ice Age winters. There was interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals. Scientists have confirmed this through ancient DNA analysis. And those Neanderthal genes, including genes related to cold climate adaptation, were passed forward into the populations that would eventually become the Norse. Neanderthals had notably large nasal structures, broad and prominent, adapted over hundreds of thousands of years to the harshest cold climates the European continent had ever seen. When their genes mixed with those of early modern humans moving into Europe, those cold climate adaptations came with them. the world's largest DNA study of Viking skeletons, published in the journal Nature in 2020, and led by Professor Eske Willerslev of Cambridge University, confirmed that the genetic history of Scandinavia was shaped by waves of migration and genetic mixing, stretching back thousands of years before the Viking Age even began. The Norse were not a pure, isolated people. They were the product of tens of thousands of years of human migration, survival, adaptation, and inheritance. And their nose, your nose perhaps, is one of the most visible physical records of that entire journey. Think about that for a moment. When you look at the bridge of your nose in the mirror, that straight, high, defined line, you may be looking at a feature that has been passed down through an unbroken chain of ancestors stretching back before the Vikings, before the Bronze Age, before agriculture, all the way back to the first modern humans who survived a prehistoric European winter and passed their cold-adapted genes forward to you. Drop a comment right now. Do you have the high, narrow Viking nose? Look in the mirror and tell me what you see. I read every single comment on this channel. Now here is where it gets personal for you specifically. A nose shape is a powerful indicator of Norse ancestry, but it is not confirmation on its own. Facial features can appear across many different populations due to the complex history of human migration across Europe. If you want to know definitively whether you carry Scandinavian or Norse genetic ancestry, and whether you carry any of the specific genetic variants associated with cold climate adaptation that the Viking people inherited, the only way to find out is through an Ancestry DNA test. Modern Ancestry DNA tests have become remarkably sophisticated. They can now break down not just your broad Northern European ancestry, but identify specific Scandinavian regional groups, Norwegian coastal communities, Swedish inland populations, Danish Viking-era lineages. They can show you the migration routes your ancestors took across prehistoric Europe. And some leading tests will now show you your Neanderthal DNA variant count, the specific ancient genetic variants you carry that trace back to that prehistoric interbreeding event between modern humans and Neanderthals in Ice Age Europe. If you have watched this video and felt that recognition, looked at your own nose, and felt something click into place, I have linked the Ancestry DNA test I would recommend in the description below. It will show you your Scandinavian percentage, your broader Northern European ancestry breakdown, your migration routes across ancient Europe, and your Neanderthal variant count. The link is in the description, and using it supports this channel at no extra cost to you. Before we close, I want to give you the complete picture, because the nose does not exist in isolation. It is part of a cluster of features that tend to appear together in people of Norse and Northern European ancestry. If you have the high, narrow, bridged nose we have been discussing, look also for these accompanying features. High, prominent cheekbones. Viking skeletal remains consistently show elevated cheekbone structure, a feature that may have evolved to provide better insulation and protection for facial tissue in freezing temperatures. Deep-set, almond-shaped eyes. The Scandinavian eye shape features deep-set eyes with slightly upturned outer corners. This configuration is thought to have evolved to protect the eyes from wind-driven snow and to enhance peripheral vision on open, frozen landscapes. A strong, defined jawline. Norse skeletal analysis shows a robust jaw structure, balanced and symmetrical, that complements the straight nose and high cheekbones into a distinctive facial profile. A broad forehead, particularly common in women of Norse ancestry. A wide, high forehead was considered a mark of beauty and strength in the Viking Age and remains genetically linked to Northern European populations today. The more of these features you recognize in yourself, especially in combination with that high, narrow nose, the stronger the case for Norse ancestry embedded in your facial structure. Somewhere in your ancestral line, centuries back, perhaps thousands of years back, a person stood on the coast of Scandinavia, breathing freezing Arctic air through the same nose shape you see in your mirror today. They survived winters that would break most people. They sailed open seas in wooden ships. They built civilizations and crossed oceans. And when they did, they carried their genes with them into Scotland, into Ireland, into England, into France, into the Americas, into every corner of the world their descendants eventually reached. Your nose is not just a feature, it is a record. Every generation that survived a northern winter and passed this shape forward to the next. Every ancestor who breathed that freezing air through a narrow passage that warmed it just enough to keep them alive. Every person in your bloodline, from the first Norse settlers all the way to the first modern humans who survived Ice Age Europe. That is what you are carrying in the center of your face. Hold out your right hand. Now try to place it completely flat on a table in front of you. Go ahead. Pause the video and actually try it. If your ring finger or your little finger pulls down toward your palm and won't lay completely flat, you may be carrying a genetic memory that is over 40,000 years old. Not just Viking ancestry. Older. Much, much older. The condition is called Dupuytren's contracture. For centuries, doctors and historians simply called it the Viking disease because it appears overwhelmingly in people of Scandinavian and Northern European descent. In Norway, around 30% of men over the age of 60 have it. In Iceland, the rates are even higher. Compare that to just 5% of the general American population, and you start to understand why this condition follows a very specific bloodline. But in 2023, a landmark genetic study published by the Karolinska Institutet in Sweden uncovered something that rewrote everything we thought we knew about this condition. This isn't just a Viking trait. It goes back to a species that walked this earth long before the first Norse warrior ever picked up a sword. By the end of this video, you will know exactly where this gene came from and what it means for your bloodline. So, what exactly is Dupuytren's contracture? It usually begins completely silently. Somewhere in your palm, most often at the base of your ring finger, a small, firm nodule forms, just beneath the skin. You might notice it as a tiny lump or a slight thickening. Many people mistake it for a callus and think nothing of it. Over months, or even years, cords of thickened tissue begin to develop beneath the skin, running from the palm up toward the finger. These cords slowly tighten like a rope being pulled, drawing the finger into a permanent downward curl toward the palm. The ring finger is affected most often, the little finger second, and in some cases, both fingers curl together, making it impossible to open the hand fully. There is a simple self-test you can do right now. It's called the tabletop test. Place your hand flat on any hard surface. Look closely. Is there a gap under your ring or little finger? A space where the skin doesn't quite reach the table? If there is, that's a positive result. Now here's something important to understand. Dupuytren's contracture does not usually cause pain. Many people live with the early signs for years, even decades, without ever knowing the condition has a name. They simply think their hand has always been that way. And often, it runs in families. Grandfather had it, father had it, now you. That is not coincidence. That is ancestry. Pause this video right now. Place your hand flat on the table one more time. Look at that ring finger. Does it lift? Because if it doesn't, you're about to find out exactly why doctors have been calling this the Viking disease for centuries. So why did doctors call this the Viking disease? Because wherever the Vikings went, this condition followed. The highest rates of Dupuytren's contracture in the world are found in Iceland and Norway, the heartland of Viking civilization. In a Norwegian study of nearly 16,000 citizens, over 10% of men had the condition. In some age groups, that figure rose to 30%. Now compare that to the rest of the world. In Southern Europe, the rates dropped dramatically. In people of African, East Asian, or Native American descent, Dupuytren's is extraordinarily rare, almost unheard of. This is not random. This is a genetic signature that belongs to a very specific group of people. Follow the Viking migration routes, and you follow the condition. Scotland, where Norse settlers intermarried with Celts for centuries, has rates significantly higher than the rest of Britain. Northern England, directly settled by Danish and Norwegian Vikings during the Danelaw era. Normandy in France, founded by Norsemen who gave it its very name. Iceland, essentially a Viking colony, where the condition is more common than almost anywhere on Earth. And then, carried across the Atlantic by the descendants of those settlers, into Ireland, Scotland, and eventually into the United States, Canada, and Australia. If your family traces back to any of those places, you are looking at a direct ancestral line to the Norse people who carried this gene across the medieval world. But here is where the story gets far more extraordinary. Because the Vikings didn't create this gene, they inherited it from something far older. Stay with me, because what researchers found in 2023 is unlike anything that has been discovered about this condition before. In June 2023, researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden published the results of the largest genetic study ever conducted on Dupuytren's contracture. They analyzed genetic data from over 7,000 people with the condition. They identified 61 significant genetic variants associated with it. And then they found something extraordinary. 3 of the most powerful genetic risk factors for Dupuytren's contracture, including the second and third strongest associations in the entire study, were not modern human variants at all. They were Neanderthal. These 3 variants entered the modern human genome over 40,000 years ago, when our ancestors first migrated out of Africa and encountered Neanderthal populations already living across Europe and Western Asia. There were children, there was interbreeding, and those Neanderthal genes were passed down, generation after generation, through the people who became the Norse, the Vikings, and eventually their descendants scattered across the modern world. This is why Dupuytren's contracture is almost entirely absent in people of African descent. Their ancestors did not make that migration through Neanderthal-inhabited Europe. They did not inherit those variants. But you might have. If you checked your hand at the start of this video and felt that familiar pull, that ring finger that never quite lays flat, you may be carrying a genetic memory that is not just Viking old. It is Neanderthal old. Think about what that means for a moment. Every person in your bloodline who carried this gene, from your father to his father's father, stretching back through Viking warriors and Norse settlers and ancient European tribes, all the way to the first modern humans who met a Neanderthal at the edge of a prehistoric forest. That is not a disease in your hand. That is 40,000 years of human history. Drop a comment right now and tell me, do you have this condition? Do you have a family member who has it? Let me know below, because I read every single comment on this channel. Now here is where it gets personal. Dupuytren's contracture is one of the strongest physical indicators of Scandinavian and Northern European ancestry that exists. But a physical trait alone cannot tell you the full story of your bloodline. If you want to know your actual Scandinavian percentage, the specific regions of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, or Iceland your family traces back to, and if you want to see your own Neanderthal DNA count, the only way to do that is through an Ancestry DNA test. Modern ancestry tests have become remarkably specific. They can now break down not just your broad European ancestry, but identify distinct Scandinavian regional groups, Norwegian coastal communities, Swedish inland populations, Danish Viking-era lineages, and crucially, Leading Ancestry DNA tests now show your Neanderthal variant count. You can see exactly how many Neanderthal DNA variants you carry compared to other users. For people with strong Northern European ancestry, these numbers are often among the highest recorded. If you have watched this video and felt something, if you checked your hand, or you remembered a parent or grandparent who had that same curl in their finger, I have linked the Ancestry DNA test I would recommend for this specific purpose in the description below. It will show you your Scandinavian and Norse ancestry breakdown, your Neanderthal variant count, and trace your family's migration routes across Europe and into the modern world. The link is in the description, and using it supports this channel. Before we close, I want to address something important for anyone who has just recognized these signs in their own hand. Dupuytren's contracture is not dangerous. It is not cancerous. It does not spread to other parts of the body. The vast majority of people who have it will live their entire lives with only mild symptoms that require no treatment at all. For most people, early Dupuytren's means a small, firm lump in the palm and a finger that doesn't quite straighten fully. That may be all it ever is. In more advanced cases, where the finger has curled significantly and is affecting your ability to grip, shake hands, or use your hands normally, there are very effective treatments available. These range from collagenase injections, which dissolve the cord of thickened tissue, to a minor surgical procedure that releases the contracture. The condition also has a strong hereditary pattern. If a parent or grandparent had noticeably curled fingers in later life, fingers they could never quite straighten, there is a significant chance that is what caused it. And now you know what to call it. 60 to 70% of people with Dupuytren's have a direct genetic predisposition. Men are significantly more likely to develop it than women, and the condition is roughly 8 times more common in men overall. If you have noticed early signs and are uncertain, a simple visit to a hand specialist or your GP will confirm it immediately. The tabletop test you performed at the start of this video is the same test doctors use. Somewhere in your family line, generations back, perhaps many centuries back, a Norseman carried this same condition in his hand. He crossed the North Sea in an open longship. He settled new lands. He raised children who raised children who raised children, until eventually the line of descent reached you. And before him, stretching even further back into the darkness of prehistoric Europe, a pair of ancient humans met at the edge of a world that was nothing like the one we know. And their children carried something forward through time. A 9th century grave was dug up in Derbyshire, England. The warrior inside had a sword, battle wounds, and full Norse burial rites. But the DNA pulled from those bones traced back to origins that had nothing to do with Scandinavia. And that single skeleton just collapsed everything we thought we knew about who the Vikings actually were. Here is the thing that mainstream history keeps getting wrong. When most people hear the word Viking, they picture a blonde Scandinavian warrior with a horned helmet sailing out of Norway. But genetic sequencing reveals something far more explosive than that. Vikings were not a race. They were not even really a nationality. They were something closer to a mindset, a military culture, a network that stretched across continents in ways that modern science is only now beginning to prove. And here is where it gets personal. You might be part of that network. Even if your ancestry has zero connection to Scandinavia, even if your family comes from Ireland, Scotland, Russia, Turkey, or North Africa, the evidence is there. We just have to know where to look. Let us start with what the DNA is actually telling us. Genetic ancestry research uses something called haplogroups. Think of these as your ancestry fingerprint. Every human on the planet carries specific genetic markers inherited from thousands of years of migration and mixing. Scientists can now trace these markers like a forensic investigator following footprints across time. The haplogroup most associated with Viking ancestry is called R1a. When researchers began mapping R1A across modern populations, the results did not match the official story at all. Yes, R1A shows up strongly in Scandinavia, but it also dominates large populations across Poland, Ukraine, Russia, and even parts of India and Pakistan. The same genetic signature, the same ancestral marker, the same DNA fingerprint, spread across thousands of miles and dozens of modern nations. So either Vikings traveled much further than your history textbook admits, or the people carrying that marker are all connected to the same ancient warrior culture that eventually became the Norse world. Either way, the map of Viking DNA is enormous, and it is pointing at populations that have never once thought of themselves as Viking descendants. But wait, because there is another haplogroup that blows this open even wider. R1b is the most common Y chromosome haplogroup in Western Europe. It dominates in Ireland, Scotland, France, Spain, and Portugal. And here is where the forensic trail gets interesting. Ancient DNA extracted from Viking Age burial sites in Britain shows clear R1b signatures mixed in with Scandinavian markers. These were not local people who got conquered. These were people with mixed ancestry, warriors and settlers who carried both Atlantic European and Norse DNA in the same body. Genetic sequencing from a 2020 landmark study published in the journal Nature analyzed over 400 Viking Age individuals from burial sites across Europe, Greenland, and even North America. The findings shook the academic world. Roughly 10% of people buried in Scandinavian Viking graves were not genetically Scandinavian at all. They had ancestry from the British Isles, from Southern Europe, from Asia, and they were buried with full Viking honors, weapons, ships, grave goods, the whole ritual. That tells you something massive. Being Viking was not about where you were born. It was about who you fought with, what you believed, and how you lived. Think of it like special forces. The Navy SEALs do not recruit based on birthplace. They recruit based on what you can do and who you are willing to become. The Norse world operated on the same principle. Now let us talk about Viking migration, because this is where most history classes completely abandon the facts. Everyone knows about the raids on England and Ireland beginning around 793 AD with the attack on Lindisfarne. But that is just the opening move in a global story. The Norse did not just raid coastal monasteries, they built trade routes that connected the Arctic to the Middle East. They settled in Iceland and Greenland. They reached North America 500 years before Columbus. And they moved through what is now Russia and Ukraine, founding cities, establishing dynasties, and leaving DNA that is still detectable in those populations today. The Norse warriors who traveled east were called the Varangians. They paddled rivers through Eastern Europe, traded in Constantinople, and served as elite bodyguards for the Byzantine emperor. That unit was called the Varangian Guard, and it was the most prestigious military force in the medieval world. If you have Eastern European or Russian ancestry, ancestral markers confirm that the Varangian genetic trail runs directly through your family tree's backyard. But something even more surprising is hiding in the genetics of the British Isles. After the Viking Age raids came settlement. The Danelaw, a region of England that was literally governed under Norse law, covered huge portions of what is now Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, and East Anglia. Millions of modern English people are direct descendants of those Norse settlers. Studies suggest that up to 6% of modern British men carry direct Norse paternal lineage. That is around 2 million living people in Britain alone who carry Viking DNA and may not know it. Here is a myth that needs to be killed permanently. Vikings did not wear horned helmets. That image was invented by a 19th century costume designer for a theatrical production, and it stuck. The only fully intact Viking Age helmet ever found, discovered in Norway in 1943, has no horns, 0. The real helmets were iron, rounded, sometimes with a simple nose guard, functional, not theatrical, because these were not performers, they were operators. And those longships, every time someone calls them primitive wooden boats, a genetic historian somewhere quietly loses faith in humanity. Longships were the stealth technology of the medieval world. They were engineered to be shallow enough to sail up rivers and light enough to be physically carried over land between waterways. They were fast enough to outrun almost anything else on the ocean. The Norse were not stumbling across coastlines by accident. They were running precision operations with equipment specifically designed for speed, surprise, and extraction. Now here is the piece that almost nobody talks about. Genetic sequencing of Viking Age populations reveals a surprising level of diversity that directly challenges the blonde, blue-eyed stereotype. Analysis of ancient DNA from burial sites in Sweden, Denmark, and Norway shows that dark hair and dark eyes were not uncommon among people who were culturally and genetically Norse. The popular image of the Viking is not just inaccurate, it is a modern invention designed to fit a particular cultural narrative. One burial in particular stopped researchers cold. A grave in Birka, Sweden, discovered in the 1800s and long assumed to belong to a male Viking warrior based on the weapons, armor, and chess-like strategy game pieces found inside, was subjected to modern DNA analysis in 2017. The skeletal remains were genetically female. Ancestral markers confirm this individual was a woman, buried with every marker of a high-ranking military commander. Not a wife, not a servant, a commander. The mainstream story said women did not fight. The DNA said something very different. So where does this leave you? If you have Irish, Scottish, English, Eastern European, Russian, or even parts of South Asian ancestry, there is a genuine, scientifically supported possibility that Viking genetic markers are threaded through your own DNA. You may not see it in a basic ancestry percentage breakdown. These haplogroups often get categorized under regional labels rather than being flagged as Norse directly. But the forensic trail is there for anyone willing to follow it. Here is the bigger picture that genetic sequencing is forcing historians to accept. The Viking Age was not a regional event, it was a global one. The Norse world touched 4 continents. It connected populations that had no other point of contact. It left genetic fingerprints from the coast of Newfoundland to the streets of Istanbul. And the modern descendants of that world are sitting in living rooms in Dublin and Delhi and Detroit, carrying that DNA without any idea. The evidence does not match the official story because the official story was always too small. Real history does not fit neatly into a textbook chapter. It bleeds across borders, mixes cultures, and survives in ways that only science can trace now. You might be Viking, not as a fantasy, not as a costume, but as a biological, genetic, ancestral reality. And that is not mythology. That is exactly what the DNA is telling us. Every physical sign we've covered in this video, the genetic conditions that trace back 40,000 years, all of it leads to the same question. What does your DNA actually say? Because physical signs can point you in the right direction, but the only way to get a real answer, your actual Scandinavian percentage, your haplogroup, your Neanderthal variant count, is to test. I've linked the Ancestry DNA test I recommend in the description below. It's the same one I'd use myself. It shows you your exact Norse ancestry breakdown, which specific regions of Scandinavia your family traces back to, and how many Neanderthal variants you're carrying compared to everyone else who's tested. The link is in the description. Using it supports this channel at no extra cost to you. If you watched this far, you already know the answer. You've been curious about this for a reason. Go find out. Drop a comment below telling me which sign you recognized in yourself. I read every single comment on this channel, and I reply to as many as I can. Subscribe if you want more. Every video on this channel goes deeper into Viking ancestry, genetics, and the science behind your bloodline. The link is in the description, and I'll see you in the next one.